Every December, something strange happens across the Western world. Millions of people cut down trees or buy plastic imitations of trees and drag them inside their homes. They hang glass balls and strings of lights on the branches. They place a star or an angel on top. They surround the base with wrapped boxes. They hang socks over their fireplaces. They tell their children that an immortal man lives at the North Pole, where he monitors the behavior of every child on Earth. He knows when they are sleeping. He knows when they're awake. He knows if they've been bad or good. And once a year, on a single night, he breaks into their homes through the chimney while they sleep. Parents bring their children to shopping malls to sit on this stranger's lap. The children tell him their desires. He promises to fulfill them if they've been good. This elaborate lie continues for years. Parents gaslight children who express doubt. They leave half-eaten cookies and bite marks in carrots as evidence. They write letters in disguised handwriting. And then, eventually, they reveal that none of it was real, that they had been lying systematically for the child's entire conscious life. And the children are expected to be fine with this. If you described Christmas to someone who had never heard of it, if you explained it objectively, without the cultural context, it would sound insane. It would sound like a fever dream, a mass hallucination, a society-wide ritual whose meaning has been lost, but whose forms persist. And in a way, that's exactly what it is. Christmas is the most celebrated holiday in the Western world. It generates hundreds of billions of dollars in economic activity. It dominates 2 months of the calendar. It shapes childhoods, stresses families, and runs on a mythology so deeply embedded that we've stopped seeing how strange it is. And almost nothing about it is what we think. The date is wrong. Jesus Christ, whose birth the holiday supposedly celebrates, almost certainly wasn't born on December 25th. He was probably born in spring. The winter date was chosen for entirely different reasons. The traditions are pagan. Christmas trees, Yule logs, gift-giving, feasting, decorating with holly and mistletoe. None of these have anything to do with Christianity. They were absorbed from older religions that the church couldn't eliminate. The jolly gift giver evolved from a violent bishop who once punched a man for heresy, through centuries of transformation that included demons, child-terrorizing monsters, and a deliberate corporate rebranding in the 20th century. And the timeless traditions we consider ancient were mostly invented by Victorians less than 200 years ago, then amplified by advertisers who saw an opportunity to sell things. Tonight, we're going to unwrap Christmas. Not the presents, the holiday itself. We're going to peel back the layers of mythology and commerce to see what's underneath. We'll answer the questions you've probably never thought to ask. Why December 25th? If Jesus wasn't born then, why did the church choose that date? Why do we bring trees inside our homes and decorate them? What does that have to do with Christ's birth? Who was St. Nicholas really? And how did a 4th century Turkish bishop become a flying home invader in a red suit? Why did the Puritans ban Christmas? What were they so afraid of? Who is Krampus? And why did children across Europe spend Christmas terrified of being beaten and dragged to hell? How did Charles Dickens, a struggling novelist, accidentally invent the modern meaning of Christmas? And what is Coca-Cola's actual role in creating Santa Claus? None of this is arbitrary. Every tradition has an origin. Every symbol has a history. And almost all of those histories have been deliberately obscured, sentimentalized, or erased. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. If you believe that the traditions we practice deserve to be understood, that the gap between mythology and history is worth exploring, you can help us continue this work by liking this video and subscribing. Your support allows us to keep digging into the stories we've forgotten. Tonight we will walk through 7 chapters of Christmas's hidden history. We'll go back 2,000 years to Roman orgies and Germanic blood sacrifices. We'll meet saints and demons, Puritans and poets, advertisers and factory workers. We'll trace how a winter solstice celebration became a Christian holy day, became a Victorian family ritual, became a global commercial engine. By the end, you'll never look at Christmas the same way. You'll see the pagan bones beneath the Christian skin. You'll understand that when you hang ornaments on a tree, you're participating in a ritual older than Christ. When you tell your children about Santa, you're passing down a mythology assembled from Turkish bishops, Norse gods, Dutch traditions, American poetry, and corporate advertising. Christmas is a Frankenstein's monster of a holiday, pieces stitched together from a dozen different sources, animated by commerce, given meaning by sentiment, and kept alive by sheer repetition. We've forgotten what the pieces were. Tonight, we remember. Welcome to the Midnight Archives. Before there was Christmas, before there was Christ, before there was Rome, or writing or civilization as we know it, there was the darkness. Every year, in the Northern Hemisphere, the days grow shorter. The sun rises later and sets earlier. The shadows lengthen. The warmth drains from the world. And for ancient peoples without electric lights, without central heating, without any scientific understanding of why this was happening, the darkening of the year was terrifying. What if the sun didn't come back? This wasn't an abstract fear. It was existential. The sun provided everything: light, warmth, the growth of crops, the rhythm of life. If the sun continued weakening, if the days kept getting shorter, everything would die. Humanity would freeze in eternal darkness. And every year, around December 21st or 22nd, the darkness reached its peak. The winter solstice, the longest night of the year, the day with the fewest hours of sunlight, the moment when the sun was weakest, when it hung lowest on the horizon, when it seemed most likely to simply give up and disappear. And then, miraculously, it stopped. After the solstice, the days began lengthening again, just slightly at first, a minute or two of extra light. But it was enough. The sun was returning. The darkness would not win. Life would continue. This was worth celebrating. This was worth ritualizing. Every culture in the Northern Hemisphere developed winter solstice celebrations, festivals of light against darkness, rituals to encourage the sun's return, feasts to provide hope in the coldest time. And December 25th, the date we now call Christmas, falls just a few days after the solstice, close enough that ancient peoples could observe the days beginning to lengthen, close enough to celebrate the sun's rebirth. This is not a coincidence. Christmas is on December the 25th because that date was already sacred, already a time of celebration, already a festival of light. The Christians didn't invent this timing, they inherited it. In ancient Rome, the weeks around the winter solstice were dominated by Saturnalia, a festival honoring Saturn, the god of agriculture, time, and liberation. Saturnalia began on December 17th and continued for nearly a week, through December 23rd. It was the most popular holiday in the Roman calendar, a time of celebration, feasting, and deliberate social chaos. During Saturnalia, the normal rules of Roman society were suspended. Schools closed, courts closed, no punishments could be administered. Gambling, normally illegal, was permitted. Sexual restraints were loosened. The toga, the formal garment of Roman citizenship, was set aside in favor of casual clothing. Most remarkably, the social hierarchy was inverted. Masters served their slaves at dinner. Slaves could speak freely, even criticize their masters, without fear of punishment. A lord of misrule was appointed to preside over the festivities, often a slave or commoner given mock authority. People gave gifts, small presents, candles, wax figurines, gag gifts, sometimes money. The gifts were called sigillaria, and giving them was an expected part of the celebration. They feasted, enormous meals, excessive drinking, indulgence of every appetite. The Roman poet Catullus called Saturnalia the best of days. They decorated. Homes were adorned with greenery, laurel, ivy, holly. Candles were lit everywhere, pushing back against the winter darkness. Does any of this sound familiar? Gift-giving, feasting, decorating with greenery, time off from work, the suspension of normal rules, general license to overindulge. Saturnalia was Christmas before Christmas. It was everything we associate with the holiday, minus Christ. But Saturnalia ended on December 23rd. What happened on December 25th, specifically? In 274 AD, the Roman Emperor Aurelian established a new holiday, Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the unconquered sun. This was the feast day of Sol Invictus, the sun god who had become increasingly important in Roman religion. December 25th was chosen because it fell just after the winter solstice, the moment when the sun, having reached its weakest point, began to strengthen again. The sun was reborn. The unconquered sun had conquered the darkness once more. Dies Natalis Solis Invicti was a major festival. It was celebrated with games, feasts, and rituals. The sun god was honored at the moment of his annual resurrection. This holiday existed alongside Saturnalia, extending the festival season. Romans would celebrate Saturnalia from December 17th to 23rd, then celebrate the sun's birthday on December 25th. Nearly 2 weeks of winter celebration, centered on the solstice and the return of light. And it was into this world, a world that already celebrated December 25th as the birthday of a god, that Christianity arrived. Rome wasn't the only culture with winter solstice celebrations. Far to the north, the Germanic and Norse peoples had their own traditions. They called it Yule. Yule was a midwinter festival lasting approximately 12 days, from the solstice through early January. It was a time of feasting, drinking, and sacrifice. Animals were slaughtered, their blood offered to the gods, their meat providing sustenance through the dark months. Great logs were cut and burned, the Yule log. These enormous pieces of wood would be lit on fire and kept burning for the 12 days of the festival. The fire provided light and warmth, pushing back the darkness. The logs burning was a ritual, a magical act that helped ensure the sun's return. The Norse god Odin was particularly associated with Yule. He was believed to lead the wild hunt, a ghostly procession of spirits that rode through the winter sky during the darkest nights. Odin flew through the air, riding his 8-legged horse Sleipnir, accompanied by the dead. Think about that image. An old man with a long white beard flying through the winter sky, associated with a list of the dead and the living, accompanied by a magical creature with an unusual number of legs. Odin also had ravens who served as his eyes and ears throughout the world. He knew everything that happened. He knew who had been good and who had been wicked. The Yule goat, the Julebok, was another important figure in Norse and Germanic tradition. Originally associated with Thor, the goat eventually became a gift-giving figure. In Scandinavian countries, the Yule goat would bring presents, a tradition that predates our modern Santa Claus. The Germanic peoples also decorated with evergreens, branches, wreaths, entire trees. Evergreens were magical plants, greenery that stayed alive through winter when everything else died. Bringing them into the home was a way of bringing that magic, that life force inside. Yule traditions didn't disappear when Christianity spread north. They were absorbed. The 12 days of Yule became the 12 days of Christmas. The Yule log became a Christmas tradition. The evergreen decorations became Christmas decorations. And the figure of Odin, old, bearded, flying through the winter sky, keeping track of human behavior, contributed something to the figure who would eventually become Santa Claus. When was Jesus Christ actually born? The Bible doesn't say. The Gospels describe the nativity story, the manger, the shepherds, the star, but they don't give a date. Early Christians didn't celebrate Christ's birthday at all. Birthday celebrations were considered a pagan practice, something the Romans and Greeks did. Christians celebrated death days, the days martyrs died and entered heaven, not birthdays. When later Christians tried to figure out when Jesus was born, they had to work backward from clues in the text. The Gospel of Luke mentions that shepherds were keeping watch over their flock by night when Jesus was born. In Judea, shepherds typically didn't stay in the fields with their flocks during winter. It was too cold. They brought the animals inside. This suggests a birth date in spring or fall, not December. Some early Christian writers proposed dates in spring, March, or April. Others proposed dates in fall. December was not generally considered. So why December 25th? The first reference to December 25th as Christ's birthday appears in a Roman almanac from 354 AD. By this point, Christianity was the official religion of the Roman Empire. Emperor Constantine had converted in 312 AD, and Christianity's victory was complete. The church faced a problem. Pagans were still celebrating their winter festivals. Saturnalia, the birthday of Sol Invictus, Yule. These traditions were deeply embedded. People weren't going to stop partying just because they were now officially Christian. So the church made a strategic decision, the same decision they would make with Samhain and All Hallows' Eve, the same decision they would make throughout the ancient world. Instead of fighting the pagan festivals, they absorbed them. December the 25th was already the birthday of a god, the unconquered sun. What if it was also the birthday of the Son of God? The linguistic coincidence was convenient in languages where sun and sun were similar. Christ could be the true sun, the true light that conquers darkness. Pope Julius I is sometimes credited with officially declaring December 25th as Christ's birthday, around 350 AD. The choice was pragmatic. People were already celebrating. The church redirected the celebration. Keep your parties, the church essentially said. Keep your feasting, your gift-giving, your greenery, your lights. Just say they're for Jesus now. The strategy worked. Within a century or two, Christmas was established as a major Christian holiday throughout the Western world, but it brought its pagan cargo with it. The date was pagan, the decorations were pagan, the customs were pagan. Only the name and the theological meaning were Christian. And the Christians weren't just absorbing Roman traditions. As Christianity spread north, it absorbed Germanic and Norse traditions too. Yule merged with Christmas. The Yule log became the Christmas log. The 12 days of Yule became the 12 days of Christmas. The evergreen decorations, the feasting, the gift-giving, all of it folded into the Christian holiday. Christmas became a container. It held everything the cultures it conquered had put into winter celebration. Roman chaos, Germanic sacrifice, Norse mythology, Christian salvation, all of it mixed together, all of it called Christmas. But the church didn't just absorb holidays. It also absorbed saints and transformed them. One saint in particular would undergo a transformation so dramatic that his original identity would be completely lost. He would evolve from a violent, heretic-punching bishop into the jolly figure we now call Santa Claus. But before he was jolly, he was something far more complicated. There was a real Saint Nicholas. He actually existed. He was born around 270 AD in Patara, a city in Lycia, in what is now southern Turkey. He became the Bishop of Myra, another Lycian city, and died around 343 AD. That's essentially all we know for certain. Nicholas lived during a pivotal time in Christian history. He was born when Christians were still being persecuted by the Roman Empire. He may have been imprisoned for his faith under the Emperor Diocletian. He lived to see Christianity become the official religion of Rome under Constantine. He allegedly attended the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, the council that established Christian orthodoxy. But the details of his life are lost. He didn't write anything that survived. Contemporary accounts don't mention him. Everything we know about Nicholas comes from legends that developed centuries after his death, and those legends are extraordinary. The most famous Nicholas legend concerns 3 young women and bags of gold. According to the story, there was a poor man in Myra with 3 daughters. In the Roman world, daughters needed dowries to marry. Without a dowry, a woman couldn't find a husband. And without a husband, a woman without other resources had limited options: poverty, servitude, or prostitution. This man had no money. He faced the horrifying prospect of selling his daughters, or watching them sell themselves. Nicholas heard about the family's plight. One night, he secretly approached the house and threw a bag of gold through the window. The gold provided a dowry for the eldest daughter, and she was able to marry. Nicholas did this twice more, once for each daughter. Each time, a bag of gold thrown through the window in the dark of night. Secret generosity. Anonymous salvation. In some versions of the story, Nicholas threw the gold down the chimney, and it landed in stockings that had been hung by the fire to dry. This is the origin of several Christmas traditions. The bags of gold became the 3 gold balls that still symbolize pawnbrokers. The secret gift-giving became the basis for Santa leaving presents. And the stockings by the fire became the Christmas stockings we still hang today. The story is almost certainly not historical, but it captures something about how Nicholas was remembered. As a secret benefactor, a protector of the vulnerable, someone who gave gifts in the night when no one was watching. The second great Nicholas legend is considerably darker. According to this story, a terrible famine struck the city of Myra. Food was desperately scarce. People were starving. A local butcher, some versions say innkeeper, saw an opportunity. 3 young boys, traveling alone, stopped at his establishment. The butcher murdered them. He chopped up their bodies, salted the flesh, and stored them in barrels of brine. He intended to sell the meat as pickled pork. Nicholas, through divine revelation, learned what had happened. He went to the butcher's shop. He confronted the murderer. And then he performed a miracle. Nicholas made the sign of the cross over the barrels. The 3 boys rose up, alive and whole. They had been resurrected, restored to life after being murdered and dismembered. This is a saint's legend. This is a story that was told to children in medieval Europe about the original Santa Claus. Think about that for a moment. The Christmas figure we now associate with cookies and reindeer was once associated with the resurrection of murdered, pickled children. The legend explains why Nicholas became particularly associated with children. He was their protector, their savior, the one who could rescue them from the most horrifying fates. He wasn't just a gift giver. He was a guardian against the darkness, a figure who stood between children and the terrors of the world. We'll return to this story later. Because the butcher who murdered those children doesn't disappear from Christmas tradition. He becomes something else, a dark figure who follows Saint Nicholas, punishing children rather than saving them. And then there's the violence. According to legend, Nicholas attended the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. This was the council where Christian bishops gathered to resolve theological disputes and establish orthodox doctrine. The most contentious debate concerned the nature of Christ. Was Jesus fully divine, or was he a created being, subordinate to God the Father? Arius, a priest from Alexandria, argued that Christ was created by God, that there was a time when the Son was not. This position, known as Arianism, had many supporters. Nicholas was not among them. During the council debates, according to the legend, Nicholas became so enraged by Arius's heresy that he walked across the room and slapped him in the face. Some versions say he punched him. Either way, a bishop physically assaulted another clergyman in the middle of the most important Christian council in history. The other bishops were horrified. Nicholas was stripped of his bishop's vestments and thrown into prison. Physical violence at a church council was unacceptable, regardless of how heretical the victim's theology. But then, according to the legend, Nicholas received a vision. Christ and the Virgin Mary appeared to him in his cell. They returned his vestments and his book of the Gospels, signifying divine approval. The other bishops, learning of this miracle, released Nicholas and restored him to his position. This story was told for centuries. It was depicted in icons and paintings. Nicholas slapping Arius was considered a heroic act, a defense of true doctrine against dangerous heresy. Santa Claus once punched a guy for theological disagreement. The Nicholas who emerges from these legends is not the jolly figure of modern imagination. He's fierce, violent, powerful. He's a protector, yes, but a warrior protector. He raises the dead and strikes heretics. He gives gifts, but also dispenses justice. This is the figure who would evolve into Santa Claus, and the evolution would take a very strange path. Nicholas died in Myra and was entombed there. His grave became a pilgrimage site, and his bones, like the bones of many saints, were believed to have miraculous properties. According to tradition, Nicholas's bones secreted a liquid called myrrh or manna, a fragrant oil that was believed to have healing powers. This miracle made his relics particularly valuable. Pilgrims came from across the Christian world to pray at his tomb and collect the miraculous oil. In 1087, Italian merchants from the city of Bari decided they wanted those bones. Myra, by this point, was under threat from the Seljuk Turks. The merchants claimed they were rescuing the relics from potential desecration. They sailed to Myra, broke into the church, smashed open Nicholas's tomb, and stole his skeleton. This was theft, grave robbery. But in the medieval world, stealing relics was common and often celebrated if the theft was successful. Possession of powerful relics brought pilgrims, and pilgrims brought money. Cities competed for the best saints' bones. The merchants brought Nicholas's bones to Bari, where they were installed in a grand basilica. The Basilica of St. Nicholas still stands today, and Nicholas's bones are still there. Modern scientific testing has confirmed they date to the correct period and that the skeleton belonged to an elderly man from the Eastern Mediterranean. The theft made Nicholas a major saint in Western Europe. His cult spread rapidly. He became the patron saint of children, of sailors, of merchants, of pawnbrokers, of prisoners, of various cities and countries. By the medieval period, he was one of the most popular saints in Christianity. His feast day was December 6th, the date of his death, or the date his bones arrived in Bari, depending on the tradition. And December 6th became a day for gift-giving, for celebrating children, for remembering the bishop who gave gold in the night and raised the dead from the barrels. Nicholas's cult was particularly strong in the Netherlands, where he was known as Sinterklaas, a Dutch contraction of Sint Nicolaas. Dutch Sinterklaas traditions developed their own distinctive character. Sinterklaas wasn't just a saint who was prayed to. He was a figure who arrived in person once a year. According to Dutch tradition, Sinterklaas lives in Spain, an odd detail possibly connected to the Spanish Netherlands or to the fact that Spain was exotic and far away. He arrives in the Netherlands by steamboat in mid-November, greeted by enormous public celebrations. He wears the vestments of a bishop, red robes, a tall mitred hat, and carries a bishop's staff. He has a long white beard. He rides a white horse named Amerigo that can walk across rooftops. On the night before his feast day, December 5th, children leave their shoes by the fireplace, filled with hay and carrots for Sinterklaas's horse. Good children receive gifts in their shoes. Bad children receive. But we'll get to what bad children receive in the next chapter, because Sinterklaas doesn't work alone. This Dutch tradition, Sinterklaas arriving by boat, riding across rooftops, leaving gifts in shoes, is the direct ancestor of the American Santa Claus. Dutch settlers brought Sinterklaas to New Amsterdam, which became New York. The tradition survived and evolved. Sinterklaas became Santa Claus. The shoes became stockings. The horse became reindeer. December 5th became Christmas Eve. But before we trace that evolution, we need to talk about what happened to the bad children. Because for most of Christmas history, the gift bringer had a partner, a dark companion, someone to handle the punishments while Nicholas handled the rewards. We think of Santa as a solitary figure, maybe some elves in the background, maybe Mrs. Claus. But for centuries, the December gift giver traveled with something terrifying. Across Europe, under different names, this figure threatened to beat children with switches, stuff them in sacks, and drag them to hell. His most famous name is Krampus. and he's only one of many. Think about the problem created by the Christmas gift-giving tradition. If children receive gifts for being good, what happens to children who are bad? If there's no consequence for bad behavior, why be good at all? The system collapses into mere gift distribution, stripped of moral weight. Modern parents sometimes address this with the threat of coal in your stocking, or the idea that bad children receive nothing. But for most of Christmas history, the solution was far more dramatic. The gift giver needed a partner, a counterweight, someone whose job was punishment rather than reward. Across Europe, this dark companion took many forms. Different names, different appearances, but the same function: terrorizing children into good behavior. While St. Nicholas, or Father Christmas, or Sinterklaas rewarded the virtuous, the dark companion punished the wicked. For centuries, Christmas was as much about fear as about joy, at least for children. The most famous of these figures is Krampus. Krampus appears in Alpine regions, Austria, Bavaria, Switzerland, parts of northern Italy, and neighboring areas. His name comes from the German word Krampen, meaning claw. He is half goat, half demon. He has dark fur covering his body, cloven hooves, long curved horns, and a grotesque face with a long, lolling tongue. He is the monstrous opposite of saintly Nicholas. Krampus accompanies Saint Nicholas on his December rounds, specifically on December 5th, the night before Nicholas's feast day. While Nicholas rewards good children with gifts, Krampus deals with the bad ones. He carries a bundle of birch switches called a root, which he uses to beat naughty children. The sound of the switches was meant to remind children of what awaited them if they misbehaved. He carries chains, heavy iron chains that he rattles ominously. According to some traditions, the chains represent the binding of the devil by the Christian church. Krampus is a demon under the church's control, forced to serve Nicholas, and he carries a basket or sack on his back. This is where the truly wicked children go. Krampus stuffs them into his basket and carries them away, to his lair in the mountains, or directly to hell. The threat was explicit. If you were bad enough, Krampus would drag you to damnation. The tradition survives today. Krampusnacht, Krampus Night, is still celebrated on December 5th in Alpine communities. Young men dress in elaborate Krampus costumes, fur suits, carved wooden masks, chains, switches. They roam the streets in what's called a Krampuslauf, a Krampus run, chasing people, swatting at them with birch branches, making as much noise and terror as possible. It's both terrifying and carnivalesque. The costumes are genuinely frightening. The participants often drink heavily. The line between tradition and chaos is deliberately blurred. Krampus was suppressed for periods. The Catholic Church, and later the fascist governments of the 20th century, tried to eliminate him as either pagan or inappropriate. But he kept coming back. The tradition was too popular, too deeply rooted to be destroyed. In recent decades, Krampus has experienced a revival. He's become a pop culture phenomenon, appearing in movies, TV shows, greeting cards. He's been partially domesticated, turned into something more cute than terrifying. But in the Alpine villages where the tradition never died, Krampusnacht is still genuinely frightening. The costumes are disturbing. The energy is chaotic. And behind the spectacle is a reminder: Christmas has always had a dark side. In France, the dark companion is called Père Fouettard, Father Whipper. Remember the legend of the pickled children, the butcher who murdered 3 boys and stored them in barrels until Saint Nicholas resurrected them. According to French tradition, that butcher became Père Fouettard. After Nicholas exposed his crime and performed the miracle, the butcher was condemned to follow Nicholas forever, serving as his dark assistant. His punishment is eternal service. He can never escape. He must accompany Nicholas on every journey, forever reminded of the children he murdered. And his job now is to whip the naughty children. Père Fouettard is usually depicted as a sinister figure in dark robes, often with a scraggly beard and wild hair. He carries a whip or switch. He accompanies St. Nicholas on December 6th, dispensing punishments while Nicholas dispenses rewards. Think about the theological message here. A child murderer, redeemed through forced service to the saint he wronged, now punishes wicked children instead of killing them. It's a story about justice, about penance, about the possibility of redemption even for the most horrific sinners. But for a child hearing this story, the message is simpler. A murderer follows Father Christmas. Be good, or the murderer will whip you. In German regions, and among the Pennsylvania Dutch communities who preserved German traditions in America, there was Belsnickel. Belsnickel is a fur-clad, ragged figure who arrives in the weeks before Christmas. He wears tattered clothing, sometimes covered with bells, hence the name. Bell from bells, or possibly from pels, meaning fur. He has a dirty face, a wild appearance. He looks like a vagrant, a frightening stranger. Belsnickel doesn't work with a kindly companion. He handles both rewards and punishments himself. He would enter homes, usually while children were gathered together, and quiz them. Did they know their prayers? Could they recite their catechism? Had they been obedient to their parents? In one hand, he carried a switch. In the other, candy or small treats. Children who answered correctly and demonstrated good behavior received candy. Children who failed received the switch. Sometimes he would throw the candy on the ground. When children scrambled to pick it up, he would swat at their hands and backs with his switch. The pleasure of candy was mixed with the pain of punishment. The message was constant. Even gifts come with a reminder of the consequences of bad behavior. Belsnickel survived in Pennsylvania Dutch communities into the 20th century. Some families still remember the tradition, though it's largely faded. He was never quite as famous as Krampus, but for German-American children in Pennsylvania and beyond, he was the face of Christmas terror. In the Netherlands, Sinterklaas is accompanied by a figure called Zwarte Piet, Black Pete. Traditionally, Zwarte Piet was depicted by white performers in blackface, dark makeup, red lips, curly black wigs, Renaissance-style clothing. He's Sinterklaas's helper, often depicted as mischievous and playful rather than purely threatening. He climbs down chimneys, which supposedly explains his blackened face, though this explanation is widely considered a later rationalization. He helps distribute gifts, but he also carries a switch for bad children. And in older traditions, he carries a bag, not to deliver gifts, but to stuff bad children into and carry them away to Spain. Zwarte Piet has become one of the most controversial figures in European Christmas traditions. Critics argue that the character is clearly rooted in racist imagery, that blackface is inherently offensive, that the subservient relationship between white Sinterklaas and Black Pete echoes colonial and slave owner dynamics. Defenders argue that the character is beloved, that the tradition is innocent, that the blackness is from chimney soot, not racial caricature. The debate has been fierce in the Netherlands, with annual protests, political arguments, and attempts at compromise, sooty Pete's with just a few smudges rather than full blackface. It reveals how these traditions carry uncomfortable histories, how figures that seem innocent in one context can be deeply problematic in another. The origins of Zwarte Piet are genuinely unclear. Some scholars connect him to earlier dark companions like Krampus. Some point to Moorish or Turkish servants in medieval European iconography. Some note that black-faced demon figures appear in pre-Christian European folklore. Whatever his origins, Zwarte Piet demonstrates that these Christmas companion figures were never simple. They carried meanings and associations that reflected the cultures that created them, including the darkest aspects of those cultures. Iceland's Christmas terror is different from the rest of Europe. There's no St. Nicholas figure at all. Instead, there's Grýla. Grýla is a giant ogress who lives in the mountains. She has hooves, 13 tails, and an insatiable appetite. Her favorite food is misbehaving children. During the Christmas season, Grýla descends from her mountain home. She searches for naughty children, snatches them up, stuffs them in her bag, and carries them back to her cave, where she boils them in a stew. This is not a figure who beats children or threatens hell. She eats them. Grýla's sons are the Yule lads, 13 trollish figures who arrive one by one in the 13 nights before Christmas. Originally, they were threatening figures like their mother, each with a particular form of mischief. One slams doors, one steals meat, one peeps through windows, one licks spoons. Their names reflect their troublesome behaviors: Stekjastauer, Sheepcoat Clod, Giljagower, Gully Gawk, Stufur, Stubby, Thverus Lykeer, Spoon Licker, Potaska Phil, Pot Scraper, Aska Slykeer, Bowl Licker, Herdaskelia, Door Slammer, Skyer Gamur, Skyer Gobbler, Bugnakrakeer, Sausage Swiper, Gluggergeir, Window Peeper, Gatatafur, Doorway Sniffer, Ketkrokur, Meat Hook, and Katasnikir, Candle Stealer. In modern times, the Yule lads have been sanitized into gift givers, Iceland's equivalent of Santa Claus. Children leave shoes on their windowsills, and each night a different Yule lad leaves a small gift, or a rotten potato for bad children. But Grýla remains. She still haunts Icelandic Christmas, and so does the Yule cat. The Yule cat, Jólakutturinn, is an enormous black cat that prowls the countryside on Christmas Eve. It preys on people who haven't received new clothes before Christmas. If you don't have at least one new garment, new socks, a new sweater, anything, the Yule cat will eat you. This is a remarkably specific threat, and it served a practical purpose, encouraging employers and parents to provide new clothing for workers and children before the holiday. The fear of being eaten by a giant cat incentivized generosity. Iceland's Christmas traditions were designed to terrify. They reflect the harsh conditions of life on a volcanic island in the North Atlantic, where winter darkness lasted months and survival was never guaranteed. The terrors of Christmas reflected the terrors of life. In Wales, during the Christmas season, something strange would come to your door. A horse skull. A real horse skull, mounted on a pole, decorated with ribbons and bells, its jaws rigged to snap open and closed. 2 holes cut for eyes, sometimes with light shining through from within. The skull is covered with a white sheet, hiding the person carrying it. This is Mari Lwyd, the grey mare, and she comes wassailing. A group of people would carry Mari Lwyd from house to house singing. When they reached a door, they would request entry through song, but entry was not automatic. The householders had to engage in ponsio, a battle of rhyming insults and challenges, sung back and forth. If Mari Lwyd's team won the rhyming battle, if they outsung the householders, they gained entry. Once inside, they would expect food and drink. Mari Lwyd herself would chase people around the room, her skull jaws snapping. The tradition is ancient, probably pre-Christian. It may be connected to hobby horse traditions found across Britain and Europe, or to older horse cults. The meaning has been lost. What remains is the uncanny image, a literal death's head, demanding entry to your home on a winter's night. Mari Lwyd survives in some Welsh communities. She's been revived as folk tradition, celebrated as cultural heritage. But encountering her in the darkness, with her snapping jaws and hollow eyes, remains unsettling. We've sanitized Christmas. We've removed the terror. Modern American Christmas has Santa Claus, jolly, fat, unthreatening, and nothing else. There's no Krampus, no Père Fouettard, no Bellsnickel. The worst that happens to bad children is coal in their stocking, and everyone knows that's mostly a joke. But for most of Christmas history, in most of Europe, the holiday came with genuine fear. Children were told that demons would beat them, stuff them in sacks, drag them to hell, or eat them alive. Christmas was a morally serious time. The stakes were real. This wasn't just cruelty. It served a purpose. It gave the gift-giving moral weight. It made good behavior meaningful because bad behavior had consequences. It balanced the light with darkness, the rewards with punishments, and it reflected something true about the world. Winter was dangerous, darkness was real, life was precarious. The monsters of Christmas embodied the threats that surrounded every family: starvation, cold, violence, death. By personifying these fears, by ritualizing them, communities could face them together. We've eliminated the darkness from Christmas. We've made it purely happy, purely commercial, purely sweet. What have we lost? For centuries, Christmas was a wild, chaotic, sometimes terrifying celebration. Pagan roots, demonic companions, social disorder. It looked nothing like the cozy family holiday we imagine. And then something remarkable happened. The Puritans decided it was evil. They didn't try to reform Christmas. They tried to abolish it entirely. And for a while, in England and America, they succeeded. Christmas was illegal. The Puritans knew everything we've discussed in this video. They knew Christmas was pagan. They could read history. They could read the church fathers who debated whether Christians should celebrate Christ's birth at all. They knew December 25th wasn't in the Bible. They knew the date was borrowed from Roman sun worship. They knew the trees and the greenery and the feasting came from pre-Christian traditions. And they drew the obvious conclusion: Christmas was a lie. It was paganism dressed in Christian clothing. It was exactly the kind of worldly corruption that had rotted the church from within. The Puritans wanted to purify Christianity, to strip away centuries of accumulated ritual and tradition and return to the pure faith described in the Bible. And Christmas wasn't in the Bible. The apostles didn't celebrate it. The early Christians didn't celebrate it. It was a late addition, a pagan compromise, a corruption. But it wasn't just the pagan origins that bothered them. It was how Christmas was actually celebrated. Remember Saturnalia? The Roman festival of social inversion, drunkenness, gambling, and sexual license. Those traditions didn't entirely disappear when Christmas absorbed them. Medieval and early modern Christmas celebrations retained elements of that chaos. Christmas was a time of drinking, excessive drinking. The 12 days of Christmas, from December 25th to January 6th, were a period of ongoing celebration, and that celebration was wet, wassailing, caroling, feasting, toasting. Alcohol flowed freely. Christmas was a time of disorder. Mummers and wassailers would roam the streets, often masked, demanding entry to homes, demanding food and drink. The tradition could easily shade into extortion, give us treats or face tricks. Lords of misrule were appointed to preside over the festivities, just as in Saturnalia, with the usual social order temporarily inverted. Christmas was a time of sexual license. Mistletoe kissing was just the most innocent expression. The carnival atmosphere encouraged flirtation and more. For Puritans obsessed with sexual purity, this was deeply troubling, and Christmas was popish. It was associated with Catholicism, with the Mass, Christ Mass, with saints, with the rituals and ceremonies the Puritans despised. Protestant England had broken with Rome, but Christmas felt Roman, felt Catholic, felt like the enemy. For the Puritans, Christmas was a concentrated dose of everything wrong with Christianity. Paganism, Catholicism, drunkenness, disorder, superstition, and sin. It had to go. In the 1640s, the Puritans got their chance. The English Civil War, 1642 to 1651, pitted Parliament against King Charles I. The war was about many things: constitutional authority, religious freedom, economic power, but it also had a religious dimension. Parliament was dominated by Puritans and their allies. The king represented the traditional order, including the traditional Church of England with its rituals and holidays. Parliament won. Charles I was captured, tried for treason, and executed in 1649. England became a republic, the Commonwealth, ruled by Parliament and increasingly dominated by Oliver Cromwell. And the Puritans set about remaking English society according to their vision. Theatres were closed, sports were restricted, holidays were abolished. In 1647, Parliament passed an ordinance abolishing Christmas. The law stated that December 25th would henceforth be a day of fasting and humiliation, not celebration. Markets and shops were to remain open. Work was to continue. Churches were to remain closed. There would be no Christmas services, no special prayers, no acknowledgement that the day was different from any other. Christmas was illegal. Enforcing the ban was not easy. Soldiers were deployed to patrol the streets on December 25th. They would break up gatherings, confiscate decorations, arrest anyone caught celebrating. Markets were forced to remain open. Shops were required to do business as usual. But people resisted. Christmas was popular. It was one of the few bright spots in the dark, cold winter. It was a time of feasting when food was otherwise scarce. It was a break from work, a chance to see family, a tradition that went back generations. In Canterbury in 1647, a riot broke out when the town crier announced that Christmas would not be observed. Shops that tried to stay open were attacked. Decorations went up in defiance of the law. The mayor and local officials lost control of the city for several days. Similar disturbances occurred in other cities. Pro-Christmas riots, as strange as that sounds, became a recurring problem for Puritan authorities. People also celebrated secretly. Behind closed doors, in private homes, families would gather for Christmas dinner. The rituals went underground. Carols were sung quietly. Decorations were hidden inside rather than displayed outside. Pamphlets circulated defending Christmas. The Vindication of Christmas, 1652, argued passionately for the restoration of the holiday. Writers portrayed Christmas as an old man, beloved and harmless, being persecuted by killjoy Puritans. The stereotype of the joyless Puritan, opposed to all pleasure, dates to this period. And while it's an exaggeration, Puritans weren't against all celebration, just what they saw as sinful celebration. The Christmas ban certainly reinforced it. The ban lasted until 1660. In that year, the Commonwealth collapsed and the monarchy was restored. Charles II, son of the executed Charles I, returned from exile and took the throne. The Restoration brought back not just the king, but many of the traditions the Puritans had suppressed. Theatres reopened, sports resumed, and Christmas returned. But it wasn't quite the same. 13 years of suppression had disrupted the continuity of tradition. Some customs were lost or weakened. The lords of misrule largely disappeared. The social chaos calmed somewhat. Christmas survived the Puritan assault, but it was wounded, and in the following centuries, it would fade further, becoming a minor holiday, barely observed, overshadowed by other celebrations. It would take the Victorians to resurrect it. The Puritans who settled New England brought their hatred of Christmas with them. In 1659, the Massachusetts Bay Colony passed a law banning Christmas. The law stated that whosoever shall be found observing any such day as Christmas or the like, either by forbearing of labor, feasting, or any other way, would be fined 5 shillings. 5 shillings was not a trivial sum. It was enough to deter most public celebration. And the cultural pressure went beyond the law. In Puritan New England, celebrating Christmas marked you as morally suspect, as insufficiently reformed, as attached to the corrupt traditions of the old world. The ban was repealed in 1681, after the English Restoration had made it awkward to maintain laws that conflicted with practices in the mother country. But the cultural hostility to Christmas persisted in New England for generations. In other parts of colonial America, attitudes varied. The southern colonies, with less Puritan influence and more Anglican tradition, celebrated Christmas more readily. Dutch communities in New York maintained their Sinterklaas traditions. German immigrants in Pennsylvania brought their Christmas customs. But there was no unified American Christmas. The holiday was regional, contested, and inconsistent. Here's something remarkable. For much of early American history, December 25th was a regular working day. The first Congress met on December 25th, 1789. The first Christmas under the new Constitution. They didn't take the day off. It wasn't a holiday. Schools were open on Christmas. Courts were in session. Businesses operated. December 25th was not a federal holiday in the United States until 1870. America was essentially founded by people who didn't celebrate Christmas, or who celebrated it only privately and inconsistently. The national Christmas we know today is not a founding tradition. It's a later development, constructed deliberately in the 19th century. And that construction began with a handful of writers and a prince from Germany. By the early 19th century, Christmas in England and America was dying. It wasn't banned anymore, but it had faded. A minor holiday, barely observed, associated with drinking and working-class disorder rather than family celebration. And then, in the span of about 30 years, it was completely reinvented. A German prince brought the Christmas tree. An American poet created Santa Claus, and a struggling English novelist wrote a book that rewired how the Western world thinks about Christmas. His name was Charles Dickens, and he was about to save the holiday. By the early 1800s, Christmas was a shadow of what it had been. The old traditions, the lords of misrule, the elaborate feasting, the extended 12-day celebration, had largely disappeared. The Puritan suppression, the social changes of the 18th century, the rise of industrialization, all had disrupted the continuity of Christmas customs. In industrial England, factory workers didn't get 12 days off. They were lucky to get 1 day. The agricultural rhythms that had once governed the year, the natural pause in winter when there was little work to do, no longer applied. Factory machines ran year-round. Workers were expected to work year-round. Migration from countryside to city broke the chains of tradition. In rural villages, Christmas customs were passed down through families and communities. In crowded urban slums, those connections were severed. People didn't know their neighbors. They didn't have space for celebration. They didn't have money for feasting. What remained of Christmas was often just drinking. Working-class men would take the day off and spend it in pubs. Christmas was associated with drunkenness, disorder, and not much else. The holiday needed saving, and it was about to be saved, not by the church, not by the government, but by writers and artists and a prince from Germany. In 1819 to 1820, the American writer Washington Irving published The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, a collection of stories and essays. The book is mostly remembered today for The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle, but it also contained 5 essays on English Christmas traditions. Irving depicted an idealized, nostalgic Christmas, a country squire opening his manor to tenants and servants, old-fashioned games and carols, a roaring Yule log, generations gathering together in warmth and fellowship. It was beautiful, it was heartwarming, and it was largely fictional. Irving was inventing a past that hadn't quite existed. He was creating nostalgia for traditions that were already dying or had never been as universal as he implied. He was manufacturing sentiment. But it worked. His essays were hugely popular on both sides of the Atlantic. They gave people a vision of what Christmas should be, could be, if only they would revive the old ways. Irving's invented Christmas became the template. Later writers would build on his vision, and eventually it would become reality, not because it had always been this way, but because enough people decided it should be this way. In 1823, a poem was published anonymously in a New York newspaper. It was later attributed to Clement Clark Moore, a professor of biblical languages at a New York seminary, though some scholars argue it was actually written by Henry Livingston Jr. The poem was A Visit from St. Nicholas, now universally known by its first line, "'Twas the night before Christmas." This single poem created Santa Claus. Not entirely, of course. The poem drew on existing traditions, Dutch Sinterklaas, various European gift-givers, the legends of St. Nicholas, but it synthesized these elements into a coherent mythological figure that hadn't existed before. Before this poem, there was no standard Santa Claus. Different communities had different traditions. The gift bringer might be tall or short, thin or fat, scary or friendly. accompanied by demons or alone. After this poem, there was a template. He rides a sleigh pulled by 8 flying reindeer, each with a name: Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, and Blitzen. He comes down the chimney, an echo of Dutch Sinterklaas tradition, now made universal. He fills stockings hung by the fire. He's described as a right jolly old elf, chubby, white-bearded, dressed in fur, with a sack full of toys. He visits on Christmas Eve while children sleep. He knows who's been naughty and nice. The poem was reprinted constantly. It was memorized by children. It was illustrated by artists. By the mid-19th century, it had become foundational, the primary source text for the Santa Claus mythology. A single poem, probably written in a single evening, created the central figure of American Christmas. In 1843, Charles Dickens was in trouble. He was 31 years old, already famous as the author of Oliver Twist and the Pickwick Papers, but his recent novels had underperformed. He had a large family to support and expensive tastes. He was in debt. He needed a hit. He also had something to say. Earlier that year, Dickens had visited schools for poor children in London's Field Lane ragged schools. He had seen the conditions these children endured, the poverty, the hunger, the lack of opportunity. He had read a government report on child labor in mines and factories, documenting horrors that outraged him. Dickens wanted to write something that would move people, that would make them see the suffering in their midst and do something about it. He considered writing a pamphlet, a political tract, a direct appeal. Instead, he wrote a ghost story. He wrote A Christmas Carol in 6 weeks, finishing in late November 1843. It was published on December 19th. It sold out in days. You know the story. Ebenezer Scrooge, a miserly businessman, is visited by the ghost of his dead partner, Jacob Marley, who warns him to change his ways. 3 spirits, the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to come, show Scrooge visions that break his hardened heart. He wakes on Christmas morning transformed, gives generously to the poor, raises his clerk Bob Cratchit's salary, and becomes a second father to Cratchit's disabled son, Tiny Tim. It's a redemption story. It's a ghost story. It's a social critique disguised as a fairy tale, and it changed Christmas. A Christmas Carol established what Christmas should mean, not just feasting and celebration, but charity toward the poor. Not just family gatherings, but openness to those outside the family. Not just tradition, but moral transformation. The book made keeping Christmas a moral imperative. Scrooge's famous "Bah, humbug" became the shorthand for mean-spirited refusal to participate in Christmas generosity. God bless us, everyone, Tiny Tim's closing line, became the blessing that summarized Christmas spirit. Dickens didn't just describe Christmas, he defined it. He told Victorian England what the holiday should be, and Victorian England agreed. The book was adapted for stage almost immediately. Dickens himself performed public readings of it until his death in 1870, becoming closely associated with the holiday he had transformed. Every modern Christmas movie about redemption, from It's a Wonderful Life to Elf to The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, descends from A Christmas Carol. A struggling novelist, writing desperately to pay his bills, accidentally created the template for modern Christmas meaning. In 1840, Queen Victoria of England married Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, a German principality. Albert brought his German Christmas traditions with him. Among them, the Christmas tree. Christmas trees had existed in German-speaking regions for centuries. probably evolving from pre-Christian evergreen decorations. But they were not common in England. The English might decorate with greenery, holly, ivy, mistletoe, but bringing an entire tree inside and decorating it was a foreign practice. In 1848, the Illustrated London News published an engraving of the royal family gathered around their Christmas tree at Windsor Castle. Victoria, Albert, and their children stood beside a decorated evergreen, surrounded by presents and candles. The image was wildly popular. Victoria was beloved. Whatever she did, the middle classes wanted to imitate. If the royal family had a Christmas tree, everyone wanted a Christmas tree. Within a decade, Christmas trees were ubiquitous in England. Within 2 decades, they had spread to America. The ancient tradition of the Christmas tree was in fact a German import, popularized by a German prince, spread by a magazine illustration in 1848. It's less than 200 years old. The same year as A Christmas Carol, another Christmas institution was born. In 1843, Sir Henry Cole, a British civil servant and inventor, was too busy to write individual Christmas greetings to all his friends and associates. So he commissioned an artist, John Callcott Horsley, to design a printed card that could be sent to multiple recipients. The card depicted a family celebration, 3 generations toasting the viewer, with smaller images of charity toward the poor on either side. It read, "A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you." Cole had about 1,000 copies, printed and sold the extras for £1 each. It was a modest commercial venture, but the idea caught on. Within a few decades, Christmas cards were an industry. Improvements in printing technology and the postal system made them affordable and easy to send. What had been a convenience for a busy man became a social obligation for everyone. Now you were expected to send cards to family, to friends, to business associates, to everyone you knew. Failure to send a card was a social slight. The tradition of Christmas cards had been invented, and everyone had to participate. Let's be clear about what happened in the Victorian era. The Victorians did not preserve ancient Christmas traditions. They invented new ones and called them ancient. The Christmas tree, invented, or more accurately, imported and popularized. The Christmas card, invented. The Santa Claus mythology as we know it, invented. The emphasis on children, invented. Earlier Christmas celebrations were primarily adult affairs. The emphasis on family gathering at home, invented, as opposed to community celebration in public spaces. The emphasis on charity to the poor, invented, or at least dramatically amplified by Dickens. The Victorians were responding to industrialization. The old world of rural communities, extended families, and agricultural rhythms was disappearing. People were lonely, disconnected, uncertain. They needed new rituals to create meaning and connection. Christmas became that ritual, but it was deliberately constructed by writers, artists, merchants, and the middle class who consumed their products. It was a cultural project, not an organic tradition. The traditional Christmas is a Victorian invention. It's less than 200 years old. It was created within a few decades of the mid-19th century by specific individuals making specific choices. And we inherited it, thinking it was timeless. The Victorians invented Christmas, but they didn't finish the job. Santa Claus was still evolving. His appearance wasn't completely standardized. His mythology was incomplete. It would take the 20th century, and specifically American capitalism, to create the Santa we know. And despite what you've heard, it wasn't just Coca-Cola. The commercialization of Christmas was a multi-front assault that transformed a holiday of moral transformation into a holiday of consumption. Before the 20th century, Santa Claus's appearance varied widely. Sometimes he was tall and thin, sometimes he was small, almost gnome-like. The poem called him a right jolly old elf. Sometimes he wore a bishop's robes, sometimes he wore fur. His clothing might be red, but it might also be green, blue, brown, or white. Thomas Nast, the famous political cartoonist, drew Santa Claus many times between the 1860s and 1880s for Harper's Weekly. His images helped standardize Santa, making him consistently rotund, bearded, dressed in fur, but there was still variation. Then came Coca-Cola. In 1931, Coca-Cola launched a winter advertising campaign featuring Santa Claus. They hired artist Haddon Sundblom to paint the images. Sundblom created a Santa that was warm, grandfatherly, inviting. He was large, but not grotesque. He was jolly, but dignified. He wore bright red, which happened to be Coca-Cola's brand color. Did Coca-Cola invent the red suit? No. Santa appeared in red before Coca-Cola. Did Coca-Cola create Santa Claus? No. Santa existed long before 1931. But Coca-Cola standardized Santa. Their campaign ran for decades. Sundblom's paintings appeared in magazines, on billboards, in stores, everywhere. They were beautiful, memorable, consistent. They imprinted a specific image of Santa onto the American consciousness. Before Coca-Cola, Santa's appearance varied. After Coca-Cola, there was one Santa, and he looked like a Coca-Cola advertisement. A corporation didn't create Santa, but a corporation perfected him, and in doing so, claimed him. In 1890, a department store owner in Brockton, Massachusetts, named James Edgar, had an idea. He would dress as Santa Claus and walk the floor of his store during the Christmas season. Children loved it. They came from neighboring towns just to see Santa. Their parents came too, and while they were there, they shopped. Other department stores noticed. By the early 1900s, department store Santas were everywhere. Macy's, Gimbel's, Marshall Field's, every major store had a Santa for children to visit. The practice created an association that persists today. Santa equals shopping. Meeting Santa means going to a store. The magical pilgrimage of childhood leads directly to a retail environment. Children are trained from their earliest years to associate Christmas joy with commerce. The man who brings presents is met in a place that sells presents. The magic of Santa is the magic of shopping. This isn't accidental. This was designed. Department store owners understood exactly what they were doing. They were capturing children's imaginations in service of their bottom lines. Gift giving at Christmas has ancient roots. Saturnalia included gift exchange. Saint Nicholas gave gold to the poor. The traditions are old, but obligatory mass gift giving, where you are expected to buy presents for everyone in your social circle, where failure to give is a social failure, is modern. The Christmas shopping season was invented by retailers. They encouraged the idea that Christmas required gifts, that gifts meant shopping, and that the shopping should start early and continue intensively. Originally, the shopping season began after Thanksgiving. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, starting in 1924, was designed to mark this transition. Look, the Christmas shopping season is beginning. Come to Macy's. Over time, the season crept earlier. October, September, summer. Christmas in July sales. The shopping never really stops anymore. And the pressure intensified. You don't just buy for immediate family anymore. You buy for extended family, for friends, for co-workers, for teachers, for service providers, for everyone. Each gift requires thought, selection, purchase. Each gift represents money spent. The average American household spends over $1,000 on Christmas gifts and decorations. Many people go into debt for Christmas, debt that takes months to pay off after the holiday ends. We've transformed a festival of generosity into an economic obligation. The spirit of giving has become the burden of buying. Every October, the Christmas advertising begins. It's subtle at first, hints of red and green, early mentions of holiday sales. Then it intensifies. By November, it's inescapable. Christmas songs play in every store. Christmas commercials run in every ad break. Christmas decorations appear in every public space. The advertising isn't just selling products, it's selling feelings. The Christmas commercials create emotional associations, warmth, family, nostalgia, childhood, love. They trigger sentimental responses, then link those responses to products. This car will make your family happy. This perfume will make your loved one feel cherished. This phone will capture precious memories. The manipulation is sophisticated and relentless. We're surrounded by messages designed to make us feel, then make us spend. The Christmas spirit we experience is often manufactured, an emotional state created by advertisers to serve their purposes. We're not experiencing Christmas, we're experiencing advertising. The Hallmark Channel and its competitors, Lifetime, Netflix's holiday offerings, produce dozens of new Christmas movies every year. The formula is consistent. A successful but unfulfilled career woman returns to a small town, or meets a prince, or inherits a property, encounters a love interest, learns the true meaning of Christmas, and ends up happy. There's usually snow. There's always a tree lighting ceremony or a Christmas festival. Love conquers all. These movies are designed to create a specific emotional state: cozy, nostalgic, romantic, hopeful. They're cinematic comfort food. They're remarkably effective at what they do. But what they do is commercial. The movies are vehicles for advertising. The emotional state they create is meant to make viewers receptive to the commercials between segments. The Christmas feeling is a product being sold. The message of these films is always anti-materialist. The career woman learns that love matters more than success, that small-town values beat big-city ambition, that family is more important than money. But the medium is materialist. The films exist to sell advertising time, which sells products. The irony is baked in. We consume anti-consumption messages through thoroughly commercial channels. Commerce has captured Christmas. What was once a religious observance is now a secular shopping season. What was once about charity to the poor is now about gifts among the comfortable. What was once a community celebration is now a driver of retail profits. Many retailers make 20 to 30% of their annual revenue in November and December. Without Christmas shopping, retail as we know it would collapse. The economy depends on us buying things at Christmas, which means Christmas has become an economic obligation as well as a social one. We have to buy, not just for our families, but for the system. Our spending is patriotic, or at least economically necessary. Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol as a critique of capitalism, a warning about what happens when money matters more than people. The ghost of Jacob Marley wears chains he forged in life, link by link and yard by yard. Scrooge is damned for prioritizing profit over humanity. And now the holiday Dickens helped create is the centerpiece of consumer capitalism. The warning against materialism has become the engine of materialism. We buy Christmas now. We don't observe it. We've turned Christmas into an economic engine. But engines have costs. Fuel they burn, waste they produce, damage they cause. The cost of modern Christmas isn't just financial. It's human. It's psychological. Every box under the tree has a supply chain. Every family gathering has the potential for trauma. The machine of Christmas runs on more than money. It runs on labor, often exploited. It runs on expectations that leave millions feeling like failures. The true cost of Christmas is higher than any price tag. Behind every present under the tree, there's a supply chain. And those supply chains are often brutal. The toys come largely from Chinese factories. Working conditions in these facilities are often grueling. Long hours, low wages, dangerous environments. Workers making Christmas presents for American children may never be able to afford such presents for their own children. The electronics come from factories where conditions have driven workers to suicide. Foxconn, which manufactures products for Apple and other major brands, installed suicide nets outside its factories after a wave of worker deaths. These are the factories that produce the tablets and phones we wrap and put under trees. The fast fashion, the ugly Christmas sweaters worn ironically at parties, the holiday-themed clothing worn once and discarded, comes from sweatshops in Bangladesh, Vietnam, and elsewhere. Workers earn pennies per hour. Buildings are unsafe. Child labor is common. The mythology of Santa's workshop, cheerful elves making toys in a cozy North Pole cottage, hides the reality of Christmas production. The actual workshops are factory floors in developing countries, staffed by workers who don't get holidays, don't get fair wages, and don't share in the magic they manufacture. We don't think about this. We don't want to think about it. The price tag tells us what the gift costs us. It doesn't tell us what it costs to make. Christmas is supposed to be the happiest time of the year. For many people, it's the worst. The expectations are crushing. The perfect Christmas, happy family gathered around a beautiful tree, perfect meal, perfect gifts, perfect joy, exists in movies and advertisements. It rarely exists in reality. Real families are complicated. Christmas gatherings mean navigating old tensions, political disagreements, unresolved conflicts, and difficult personalities. For many people, the enforced togetherness of the holiday brings stress, not joy. Financial stress compounds the emotional stress. The pressure to buy presents, to host dinners, to decorate, to participate, it requires money. Many families spend more than they can afford, creating debt that takes months to pay off. The joy of giving is shadowed by the anxiety of paying. For those without family, or those estranged from family, Christmas loneliness is acute. The holiday assumes togetherness. Every advertisement, every movie, every song reminds you that you're supposed to be with people who love you. If you're alone, the message is clear. You're doing Christmas wrong. Seasonal affective disorder peaks during the Christmas season. The short days and long nights of winter trigger depression in susceptible people. and then they're expected to perform holiday cheer. The mismatch between internal darkness and external expectation can be devastating. The relationship between Christmas and suicide is complex. Studies show mixed results about whether suicide rates actually increase during the holidays. But the perception that this is the worst time for vulnerable people is widespread, and the increased stress is real, even if it doesn't always correlate with increased suicides. For many people, Christmas is a season to survive, not celebrate. Santa Claus is a years-long, elaborate deception we practice on children. We tell them a magical being brings presents. We provide evidence: half-eaten cookies, sooty footprints, letters from the North Pole. When they express doubt, we reassure them. We maintain the fiction for as long as possible, and then, eventually, we tell them it was all made up. The magical being doesn't exist. We were lying. The evidence was fabricated. What does this teach children? Studies on the psychological impact of the Santa myth are mixed. Some researchers find no lasting harm. Others suggest it can undermine children's trust in parents or make them skeptical of other claims, including religious ones. The structure is unusual. In other contexts, adults lying systematically to children is considered harmful. We teach children that lying is wrong while practicing an elaborate lie on them. The defenses are familiar. It's harmless fun. It preserves childhood magic. Everyone does it. And maybe these defenses are right. Maybe the Santa myth is genuinely beneficial. But it's worth at least noticing what we're doing. We're training children to believe in something beautiful and false. We're practicing gaslighting under the guise of magic. We're teaching that trust can be betrayed in service of a good story. Whether that's ultimately harmful or not, it's at least strange. Christmas has become a to-do list. Buy presents for everyone on your list. Send cards to everyone you know. Decorate the house. Put up the tree. Attend every holiday party. Host your own party. Bake cookies. Plan the meal. Cook the meal. Clean up after the meal. Wrap presents. Attend religious services if applicable. Take photos. Post on social media. Create the appearance of joy. The work is enormous, and it falls disproportionately on women. Studies consistently show that women do more of the Christmas work: shopping, wrapping, decorating, cooking, planning, card writing, family coordinating. The mental load of Christmas, like the mental load of household management generally, is gendered. By the time Christmas Day arrives, the people who did the work are often exhausted. They've spent weeks creating magic for others. They've stressed about gifts and meals and schedules. They've managed everyone's expectations while suppressing their own. The magic of Christmas requires labor. The labor is often invisible. The people who perform it are expected to also perform joy, as though the work was effortless. We've made Christmas into a performance, and performances are exhausting. After tracing Christmas from pagan origins through religious absorption, through Victorian invention, through commercial capture, a question emerges: what are we actually celebrating? The religious meaning has faded for most people. Surveys show that even among Christians, the explicitly religious aspects of Christmas are often secondary to the cultural aspects. Fewer people attend Christmas services. Fewer people emphasize the nativity. Jesus has been pushed to the margins of his own birthday party. The family meaning is complicated by actual families. The ideal of loving togetherness crashes against the reality of complicated relationships. Many people endure Christmas rather than enjoy it. The commercial meaning is all-consuming. The advertising, the shopping, the spending, these dominate the season. The meaning of Christmas has become indistinguishable from the economic activity of Christmas. Is there anything left underneath? Anything genuine beneath the layers of tradition and commerce and obligation? Maybe. Maybe there's still something worth finding. We've traced Christmas from pagan solstice to Roman holiday, to Christian absorption, to Victorian invention, to commercial capture. We've seen the demons who punish children, the Puritans who banned the celebration, the writers who created the mythology. Is there anything worth saving? Anything beneath the wrapping paper and the stress and the commerce? Or is Christmas just a machine we feed every year, forgetting why we started? Like Halloween, like Thanksgiving, Christmas is a palimpsest, a manuscript written over and over, each layer partially obscuring but never entirely erasing what came before. The pagan solstice is still there, the longest night, the fear of darkness, the hope for returning light. These remain at the core, whether we acknowledge them or not. The lights we string up are still fires against the darkness. The evergreen tree is still a symbol of life persisting through winter. The Roman chaos is still there. The parties, the gift-giving, the indulgence, the temporary suspension of normal rules. Saturnalia echoes in every office party and family feast. The Christian message is still there for those who seek it. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men, hope coming into the world in humble form, the divine becoming human so that humans might approach the divine. The Victorian sentimentality is still there. Family togetherness, emphasis on children, domestic warmth, generosity as moral obligation. Dickens' vision shapes how we think about the holiday, even if we've never read his book. The commercial machinery is definitely still there, impossible to ignore, impossible to escape, shaping the season more than any other force. All of it simultaneously, all of it true at once. Underneath everything, beneath the layers of religion and commerce and tradition, is the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, the moment when darkness reaches its peak and begins to retreat. The turning point, when the days start getting longer again. Every winter celebration, across all cultures, across all of human history, returns to this. We are creatures who fear the dark. We are creatures who celebrate when the light returns. This is encoded in our biology, in our psychology, in our deepest selves. The specific forms of celebration, trees, gifts, Santa Claus, are cultural constructions. They vary across time and place. They're invented and reinvented. But the core impulse is universal. The need to mark the solstice, to light fires against the darkness, to gather together when the cold is deepest. This predates every religion and every commerce. It will outlast them too. This is real. This is human. This is worth preserving, regardless of what cultural packaging we wrap around it. We need to pause in the middle of winter. The ancient rhythm of the year demanded rest when the fields lay fallow. Modern capitalism tries to override this rhythm, to keep us working endlessly, but the body remembers. The mind remembers. We need a break. We need to gather with others against the cold. Isolation is dangerous, especially in darkness, especially in winter. Coming together, even when the togetherness is complicated, even when family is difficult, serves a deep need. We're social creatures. We're not meant to face the darkness alone. We need to give gifts as expressions of connection, not obligatory gifts, Not gifts driven by advertising, but genuine gifts. Gestures that say, I thought of you, I know you, I value you. The commercialization of gift-giving has corrupted this, but the underlying impulse is healthy. We need to feast when food was once scarce. Winter was starvation time for our ancestors. The feast is a celebration of survival, of abundance, of having enough to share. Even now, when food is available year-round, the feast carries meaning. We need to light candles and fires against the darkness, literal lights pushing back the night. There's something in us that responds to this, a comfort, a defiance, a hope. We need to tell stories and sing songs. Shared narratives create shared identity. Even the cheesy Christmas songs, playing for the 1,000th time, create common experience. We all know the words. We're all in this together. We need to believe, even briefly, in magic. In a world that often feels disenchanted, mechanistic, explained, Christmas offers a window into wonder. Santa Claus may be a lie, but the capacity for belief he represents is valuable. These needs don't go away because we've commercialized them. They don't disappear because we've forgotten their origins. They persist because they're human. If we stripped away the commerce, the obligation, the exhaustion, what would remain worth keeping? The gathering. We need to see each other. We need to share space, share food, share time. The logistics are hard. The family dynamics are complicated. But the human need is real. The generosity. Not obligatory spending, but actual giving. Giving to those in need. Giving to those we love. Giving as expression, not as transaction. The pause. Rest in the middle of winter. A break from work. Time to breathe, to be, to not produce for a moment. The light. Literal candles. Literal lights. Pushing back against the darkness. Decorating our spaces with brightness. The stories. Not just commercial entertainment, but meaningful narratives. Stories that remind us what matters, that connect us to something larger. The music, even the cheesy songs, shared sound, shared participation, shared memory. These are worth preserving. These are worth fighting for against the commercial machine that has captured the holiday. When you celebrate Christmas, you're celebrating with ghosts. The ghosts of pagans who feared the solstice and lit fires to bring back the sun. The ghosts of Romans reveling through Saturnalia, inverting the social order for a week of license. The ghost of Saint Nicholas, slapping heretics and raising pickled children from the dead. The ghost of Krampus and his kin, terrifying children into good behavior, reminding everyone that darkness has consequences. The ghosts of Puritans who saw through the paganism and tried to stop it, who banned Christmas as a corruption. The ghost of Charles Dickens, writing desperately to pay his bills, accidentally creating the template for modern Christmas meaning. The ghosts of factory workers in China and Bangladesh, making the toys and clothes we'll give and receive. The ghosts of everyone who struggled through a difficult Christmas, who felt alone in the season of togetherness, who found the weight of expectation crushing. They're all present. They're all part of what we're doing when we observe this strange, layered, contradictory holiday. Christmas is the strangest holiday. It's a birthday party for someone born in spring, held on a pagan sun festival, featuring a Turkish bishop who became a Norse god, who became a Coca-Cola mascot. It's a celebration of peace that was born in blood sacrifice and has been fought over for centuries. It's a religious holiday that's become the economic engine of capitalism. It's a day about family that reveals how broken our families often are. It's a season of giving that's become an orgy of consumption. And yet, when the lights go up in the darkness of December, something happens. Something that isn't just commerce or manipulation or invented tradition. The days are short, the nights are long, the cold is real, and we light candles. We string up lights. We put trees in our houses and make them glow. We gather with people, even difficult people, because gathering is better than isolation. We give gifts, even obligatory ones, because giving is better than nothing. We play the same songs every year because repetition creates meaning. We tell children about magic, even knowing we'll eventually admit it was a lie, because we want them to believe in wonder for as long as possible. Is that enough? Is that worth the exploitation and the stress and the debt? I don't know. Maybe you have to decide that for yourself. But this solstice, this Christmas, this Yule, whatever you call it, the darkness is real, and the light is real, and the human need to push back against the dark is as old as humanity itself. We've forgotten what we're doing. We've buried it under wrapping paper and obligation. But underneath, the fire still burns. The sun still returns. The light still wins, at least for another year. Maybe that's all Christmas ever was. Maybe that's enough. The longest night will pass. The sun will return. The light will grow stronger. Whatever you're celebrating, whatever you're surviving, may you find a moment of genuine warmth in the cold. May the light you kindle mean something, even if you've forgotten what. And may you make it to spring. Happy Solstice. Merry Christmas. Joyeux Noël. Frohe Weihnachten. Glädlich Jul. The light returns. Thank you for journeying with us through Christmas's hidden history. Thank you for keeping the candle lit. Thank you for remembering what we've forgotten. Until next time.